We call it the Silk Road. It's a beautiful name. It conjures images of soft fabric, of luxury, of a ribbon of light connecting the east to the west. But if you were to walk it, if you were to step out of the history books and onto the hard-packed dirt of the Taklamakan Desert or the freezing passes of the Pamirs, you wouldn't feel silk. You'd feel stone. The road wasn't paved with fabric, it was paved with greed. It was paved with the hardest substances the earth could produce. Before the silk ever moved, the stones were moving. Welcome to the Mystic Apothecary, I'm Cody. Tonight, we aren't looking at the maps. We aren't looking at the empires that rose and fell to control the routes. We're looking at the cargo. We're following the veins of the earth as they were ripped from the ground and carried mile by agonizing mile across the spine of the world. Close your eyes, forget the digital glow of your screen. Let's go back to a time when the world was vast, dangerous, and dark, and the only light came from the stars above and the stones below. Our journey begins not with the road, but with the mountain. High in the Hindu Kush, in what's now the Badakhshan province of Afghanistan, there's a scar in the earth. The Sari Sang mines. These mines are terrifying. They're steep, unstable, and freezing cold, and yet men have been dying in them for 7,000 years. Why? For the blue, Lapis Lazuli. Before the concept of blue even existed in some languages, there was this stone. It isn't a crystal, it's a rock, a chaotic mix of lazurite, calcite, and pyrite. When you look at high-quality lapis, you aren't just seeing a color, you're seeing a night sky frozen in stone. The gold flecks of pyrite are the stars, the blue is the infinite void. Long before the Silk Road had a name, there was the Lapis Road. It stretched from these frozen mountains all the way to the burning sands of Egypt. Imagine the logistics. A miner in 3000 BC, shivering in a tunnel, prying a chunk of blue rock from the wall. He doesn't know what a pharaoh is. He doesn't know that this rock will end up in the death mask of a boy king named Tutankhamun. He just knows that the traders from the valley will give him grain for it. They used fire to mine it. They'd build a massive bonfire against the rock face until the stone was screaming hot. Then, they'd throw freezing water on it. The thermal shock would crack the mountain open. It was a brutal, steam-choked way to make a living. The stone travels. It's carried on the backs of donkeys down the treacherous passes. It changes hands in the bazaars of Bactria. It moves through the Iranian plateau. By the time it reaches Mesopotamia, it's sacred. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, the walls of Uruk are described as shining like copper, but the inner sanctums? They're adorned with lapis. It was the color of water in a land of drought. It was the color of the gods. The Sumerian goddess Inanna wore a necklace of lapis lazuli when she descended into the underworld. She believed the stone held the power of resurrection, the power to measure the span of a life. And for thousands of years, if you saw a piece of blue in a painting, or a jewelry box, or a church in medieval Europe, it came from this one single spot in the Hindu Kush. The Silk Road was just a new name for an old habit. The blue vein was the first artery of the world. Now we move east. We leave the mountains and descend into the Sea of Death, the Taklamakan Desert. The name itself is a warning. Go in and you won't come out. But on the southern edge of this wasteland, there's an oasis, Khotan. Here the obsession isn't color, it's texture. It's the stone of heaven, jade. To the Chinese emperors, gold was valuable, but jade was priceless. Gold had a price. Jade had virtue. It was durable, like a gentleman's integrity. It was smooth, like benevolence. And Khotan was the source. There were two rivers flowing down from the Kunlun Mountains, the Karakash, the Black Jade River, and the Urankash, the White Jade River. Picture the scene. It's night, the moon is full. The locals believed that the jade glowed in the moonlight, making it easier to find. They wade into the freezing glacial meltwater, feeling with their feet, with their hands. They're looking for the mutton fat jade, white, creamy, oily to the touch. This wasn't just mining, it was a harvest. The Silk Road here was actually the Jade Road long before silk became the currency. The caravans leaving Khotan didn't just carry stone, they carried the weight of the Chinese soul. A piece of white jade from this river would travel thousands of miles to the court of the Han Dynasty. It would be carved into dragons, into discs, into burial suits sewn with gold wire, designed to keep the body from decaying. They believed this stone could stop death. The Han Dynasty emperors were so obsessed with immortality that they'd be buried in suits made of thousands of jade plaques. They thought the stone's essence would preserve their qi. But the road is long and the desert is cruel. Khotan was a kingdom of wealth, but it was surrounded by nothingness. The traders who left here had to cross the shifting dunes. They followed the bleached bones of camels and men who failed before them. There was a specific gate they had to pass through, the Yumen Pass, the Jade Gate. It was the psychological end of the known world for the Chinese. Beyond that gate lay the barbarians. Beyond that gate lay the endless sand, and yet the jade kept coming in and the silk kept going out. And what did they bring back? From the west they brought glass, they brought wine, and they brought the red stones. Let's talk about the red, the fire. For centuries the ancient world was confused. If a stone was red, it was a ruby, or so they thought. There's a region called Badakhshan, close to the Lapis mines, that produced a stone of incredible beauty, a deep glowing rose red. They called them Balas rubies. Marco Polo traveled through here. He wrote about the king of Badakhshan, who claimed these stones for himself. If you dug for them without permission, you lost your head. But here's the twist. These weren't rubies, they were spinels. The Black Prince's ruby, the massive red stone sitting in the imperial state crown of England right now, it's not a ruby. It's a spinel from this very region. It traveled the Silk Road, passed through the hands of kings and killers, and ended up in the Tower of London. It's said that Henry V wore it at the Battle of Agincourt. A French knight struck him on the helmet with a battle axe. The helmet was crushed, but the king survived, and the stone survived. It's a survivor's stone, a trickster's stone. But they were true rubies too, darker, bloodier. Far to the southeast, in the dense jungles of Burma, lies the Mogok Valley. This is the home of the Pigeon's blood ruby. This part of the trade route was less a road and more a fever dream. The terrain was hostile. Tigers, malaria, bandits, but the stones were worth it. A true Burmese ruby has a fluorescence. When sunlight hits it, it glows from within, as if it has its own light source. The ancients believed if you put one in a pot of water, the water would boil. If you sewed it into your flesh, you'd be invincible in battle. These stones moved north, joining the Silk Road caravans in China, or moved west towards India and the sea. And that brings us to the water. We often forget that the Silk Road wasn't just land. There was a maritime Silk Road, a blue highway that connected the Red Sea to the South China Sea. And the jewel in the crown of this ocean route was an island the Arabs called Serendib. The Greeks called it Taprobana. We call it Sri Lanka. Ptolemy, the great geographer, wrote about the beryl and sapphire of this island in the 2nd century. Marco Polo said it had the best sapphires in the world. Imagine a trading port in the 4th century. A Roman ship has just docked. The sailors are exhausted. They've sailed from the Red Sea, catching the monsoon winds. They step off onto the sand and they're met by merchants holding handfuls of light. Blue sapphires, yellow topazes, purple amethysts. The island was geologically blessed. 90% of the land is made of gem-bearing rock. The rivers washed the stones down from the highlands. Farmers would find sapphires in their rice paddies. They call them ilum, the gem-bearing gravel. The Romans were obsessed. Pliny the Elder, the Roman historian, famously complained about the trade. He wrote that India was the sink of the world's gold. He calculated that Rome was sending 100 million sesterces a year to the east to pay for luxury goods and gems. Think about that. The Roman economy was bleeding gold to buy stones from Sri Lanka and India. A Roman senator wanted to show his power, so he wore a ring with a sapphire that had traveled 4,000 miles by ship and camel. They found Roman coins in the gem markets of Sri Lanka, little pieces of the Tiber River found in the mud of the tropics. It wasn't just about vanity, it was about connection to the divine. In the Vedic traditions of India, gems weren't just decoration, they were crystallized energy. They believed in the Navaratna, the 9 gems, which corresponded to the 9 planets. Wearing the right stone could appease a furious planet. Wearing the wrong one could ruin your life. This belief system traveled the road too. It seeped into Persia, into the Arab world, and eventually into the lapidaries of medieval Europe. Let's not forget the hardest stone of all, the diamond. Before the mines of Brazil or South Africa were ever discovered, every diamond in the world came from one place, India. The Golconda mines, the name itself sounds heavy, doesn't it? These were the legendary mines that produced the Hope Diamond, the Koh-i-Noor, the Regent. These diamonds were river stones, alluvial deposits washed down from the Deccan Plateau. They were prized for their incredible transparency. They described them as water of the purest ray. In the ancient markets of the Silk Road, diamonds weren't cut the way we cut them today. They didn't have the technology to facet them. They were worn in their natural octahedral shape, 2 pyramids joined at the base. They looked like dangerous, sharp points of light. The Romans called it adamus, the unconquerable. They believed a diamond could break a hammer. They believed it could ward off insanity. Merchants would carry these tiny, indestructible crystals in pouches sewn into the lining of their cloaks. A single stone could buy a castle in Europe, but it could also get your throat cut in a caravanserai in Persia. This trade network, this web of silk and stone, was the internet of the ancient world. It didn't just move goods, it moved ideas. A jeweler in Rome learned a technique from a piece of jewelry that came from India. A motif of a dragon from China ended up etched into a gemstone in Persia. But it was dangerous. We sanitize history. We look at the beautiful necklace in the museum case and we don't see the blood. Every single stone that made it to Venice or Constantinople or Chang'an represented a survival story. The miner who survived the collapse, the caravan that survived the sandstorm, the sailor who survived the pirate raid, the merchant who survived the plague that traveled along the very same road. The Black Death moved along the Silk Road. It traveled with the furs and the fabrics. It probably traveled in the saddlebags of gem traders. And yet, the trade didn't stop. The hunger for beauty, for something permanent in a world that was short and brutal, was too strong. Think about the sheer number of hands a single stone passed through. Let's trace one, a ruby. It's pulled from the mud in Mogok by a miner who believes the spirits of the mountain are watching him. He sells it to a local broker for a handful of silver. That broker treks through the jungle to a river port. He sells it to a Chinese merchant who examines it by the light of a lantern. The merchant takes it on a ship, sailing around the Malay Peninsula, dodging storms and pirates. He lands in India, where the stone is drilled and polished. It's traded again, this time to a Persian caravan master. He puts it on a camel. They walk for 3 months. They cross the Hindu Kush. They fight off bandits in the Zagros Mountains. They pay bribes to customs officers in Baghdad. Finally, it reaches Constantinople. It's bought by a Venetian trader. He takes it home, sets it in gold, and sells it to a duke. Thousands of miles, dozens of languages, years of time, all for a little piece of red corundum no bigger than a fingernail. It forces us to ask, what are we actually buying? Are we buying the stone, or are we buying the journey? We're buying the romance of the distance. We're buying the fact that this object has seen more of the world than we ever will. In the end, the road faded. The Portuguese found a way around Africa. The age of discovery changed the maps. The caravans stopped walking. The desert reclaimed the cities. But the stones are still here. That sapphire in your grandmother's ring? It might be a recut stone that was once worn by a Byzantine merchant. That ruby in the antique shop? It might have been dug out of the ground by a man who spoke a language that no longer exists. We're just the temporary custodians of these things. They're the travelers. We're just the roadside stops. When you hold a gemstone, you aren't holding a static object. You're holding a frozen moment of geological violence, mined by human struggle, transported by human greed, and polished by human vanity. It's a heavy weight, if you really think about it. So the next time you look at a piece of jewelry, don't just look at the sparkle. Look deeper. Look for the dust of the desert. Look for the salt of the ocean. Look for the shadow of the Silk Road. This has been the Mystic Apothecary. If you enjoyed this journey into the deep history of our obsession, leave a like. It helps the signal reach others in the void.